That was my kid brother broke his arm. You did a good job, Doc, even if you was drunk.
Thank you, sir. Professional compliments are always pleasing. Yes, sir. What happened to that boy whose arm I fixed?
He was murdered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Take 5, the podcast where we take a cinema legend, take 5 of their films, and hide their excellence and range. My name is Austin Digger.
My name's Eric Martindale.
And we're here on our second part of our John Ford 5. Last week we covered the masterpiece Stagecoach. Coming up we have My Darling Clementine, The Searchers, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. But today we were going to cover one of the more acclaimed and well-known of his films, the adaptation of the beloved book The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, who also wrote Of Mice and Men and East of Eden. This is a film that stars Henry Fonda as Tom Joad, who comes back from prison, finds his family is in bad shape. Turns out it's the Great Depression. And
the Dust Bowl.
And the Dust Bowl. Double whammy.
No whammy there.
And essentially it is a trek across America to kind of find a better time after they lose their farm. And the movie is, iconic for a number of reasons. It's a book that everyone's forced to read in high school. It has the magnificent monologue at the end performed by Henry Fonda. And, it's America, damn it. But I've never been a huge fan of the book or the movie. And this time watching it again, I continued to admire John Ford and Henry Fonda. It's just the other parts of the 2+ hours.
Yeah, I picked this movie because, first of all, I think it's I don't know what it is. I think it's 12th on that AFI list. It's
absurd.
It's
up for
really
a million Oscars.
Yeah, and it was a beloved film. He won Best Director for it. So people really like this film. It's it's Grapes of Wrath. It's as American as apple pie. Mm-hmm. I don't know how American it will be 100 years from now, which I kind of talked to you a little bit about, and we'll kind of get into that. But then again, what would be? Mm-hmm. But so yeah, the film isn't that great in my opinion, but it's great kind of as a piece in history, a relic, a marker for film, I think. Before film gets really good with Citizen Kane kind of right after this. Mm-hmm. So I do think that if this film would be more talked about now if the films like Casablanca and Citizen Kane don't come out. Well,
remember, this is a year after Gone with the Wind, mm-hmm. which really kind of shook up how Hollywood can be epics. Mm-hmm. And much like how we're watching everyone trying to grab their own superhero franchise, people were also grabbing the great novels like crazy. So,
sure.
Every major thing became... And
Grapes of Wrath's not that old of a book at this point.
No, but it was quick,
right.
Who's going to get this? Mm-hmm. And you get why it would be John Ford, right?
Right.
The guy understands dirt when they're directing.
He's very good with dirt.
Yeah.
And this is a very, very dirty movie. So the series of scenes that this sort of takes through is Joad coming home, going to the Joad's family residence, realizing it's gone. He meets the preacher there. This is a big dramatic, big thing because the new big companies are taking over all the farmland, so you got to head out to the promised land, California. He sees the family again, big dramatic scene. Loads up the family, big dramatic scene. Grandpa dies on the road, big dramatic scene. Every beat in the film, and this is what I think it suffered from the most, every beat in the film acts like a 10-minute play. Mm. It has every scene has a beginning, middle, and end. This isn't John Ford's fault. This is The Grapes of Wrath as a 2-hour film. Because it's not that long of a movie, but it actually feels a lot longer than it is, and I think a large part of that is because so much happens in this movie. So much happens in this movie, Austin.
Well, it's curious because people kind of look at it as, there's no other real Dust Bowl movie. This is building the Dust Bowl.
That's because Grapes of Wrath got written that people went, well, yep, that was it.
But there's so many more films about the Great Depression that just work on a more humanistic level. I don't know what is separating this movie from not connecting to movies that I like. Cinderella Man, movie we both think is very underrated.
Mm-hmm.
During that time. Mm-hmm. It's more of the Industrial Revolution, but it's also where you see Days of Heaven, mm-hmm. Kind of how it begins and kind of returning back to a land romanticized.
The Days of Heaven is a perfect film. So, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think probably it has a lot to do with the subject matter. Just in general, do people want to sit around and be depressed like that? I don't know. Some people probably do, but this is a emotionally manipulative film. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, every scene is intended to make you feel feelings very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it basically bases on two things: the cynicism and loss, and nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are like the three big things this film pumps down your throat, and each scene aspires to make you feel one of those things very strongly, one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny because it's kind of a left-wing film directed by a right-wing director.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of interesting that sort of happens that way. And I don't actually know what John Ford's politics are, but I know the movies he made. So that I'm basing that more off that than his actual politics. Actually, I don't think he was a right-winger, but John Wayne was, but I don't think he was. But regardless, his films project a certain thing, and this film is kind of like different in that regard, and I kind of think that's neat for it as well. But it just feels so damn old and distant.
It does, and I think the melodrama really does hurt it.
Yes, it does.
And because especially with a melodrama with no actual sense of contrast,
Mm-hmm.
whereas always I struggle to understand exactly what they wanted. I know it's the obvious thing of like, we're going here to kind of find
jobs.
land again and jobs and to survive, but I still just didn't picture a happy day with his family.
Well, they want the American dream, and that's melodramatic by nature.
It was like the American dream restored. I've always struggled to picture what their lives were like while he was in jail, or before he was in jail.
Mm.
It is just a film, just like
and there goes your contrast.
Yeah. It's just really kind of hard to picture, and you'll be on being miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something just very off about that because I mean, Henry Fonda, who I think is excellent in this movie.
Yeah, he's really good.
I love Henry Fonda, and the more I watch him, the more I realize how brilliant he is. He is playing a character akin to what he's like in 12 Angry Men, where he is a man who, from the very first scene, understands his ideals, and he's going to stick with his ideals through conflict. You know what I mean? Like,
when there's something very American about that.
Yes, that's kind of why we see him as one of our cinematic icons of America and patriotism and the proud elements within. I just don't like the story very much because then it's just like them on a not very dynamic road trip for me. It's like they look at this is bad. Look at this is bad. Grandpa's dead, this is bad. I've always struggled to find.
Well, they go from each misery to each misery, each calamity to each calamity, and then when they get to California, it doesn't really get any better. And then he kills somebody, so now he's got to go on the run, and that's. I mean, the book doubles down on that, like even more than the film. But the difference with the book is that it has more pages to flesh it out. This is just each scene is a 10-minute one act of misery. That's what it ends up being. I mean, the best scenes in the film to me are the very beginning before the misery starts.
Mm-hmm.
Because him returning. Yeah, him returning. I mean, and you can see like him. Don't you want to know what I was in prison for? Murder, and he shuts that's cool. It's like Henry Fonda hanging out too and being young, and that's cool to watch him like that too. But then once the ball gets rolling, the movie has a high body count.
It does, but like it still feels like a 40s Hollywood.
Yeah, well, it feels totally like a Hollywood studio picture,
and that's I think what really is going to kill its legacy.
Yeah. Well, see, I think it's dirtier. Well, that's true. I think it's actually twofold, though. I think two things kill this film's look. First of all, you can't. This movie is impossible to find on like Blu-ray and DVD. Like it's not an easy film to find. And I found out it wasn't on DVD until like 2007 or 8.
Really?
Okay, it's The Grapes of Wrath. This is like The Grapes of Wrath. And I think a big part of that is because why would you reach, if you wanted that old classic Hollywood film, you're not going to reach on the shelf for Grapes of Wrath. It somehow ended up playing second fiddle to films like Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane, Casablanca, and like a billion others, or like any of the John Ford films that he did. And but it's funny, but it's just such an American story. But the other reason why I think it sort of goes away is because it is such an American story. This is something, when this film came out, and then for years afterwards, while we read the book and while we read it in high school, and while our parents knew people, lived with their great your grandparents or great-grandparents that lived through the Great Depression, we all had a connection to this catastrophe that happened in America, which was the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl leading up to World War II. They all had that connection. As the years go by, is now 2018, we're now 90 years out from the Great Depression, and so much of America isn't farmers anymore. That's not a thing like it used to be. The connections to this film fade because it's so about. You can say, like, okay, everyone can relate to loss, everyone can relate to cynicism, everyone can relate to nationalism. That's all true, but this movie is so about the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression to the fact that it is inescapable. That is what this film is about. That at some point it becomes a relic. We move on to other things to associate the feelings Americans felt towards this. They have now moved them on elsewhere, and it just doesn't have the same effect anymore. This happens throughout history. 9/11 is now Pearl Harbor. I mean, people move those associations elsewhere, but there is no other association for the Dust Bowl.
It's true.
It doesn't exist. So I just feel like, it's like finding, like I said to you, is like, if we find a spear in the jungle that's been laying there since the 1500s, that's no longer a spear. It's a museum piece. Because we don't need a spear anymore. We got guns. Okay? We have other weapons. We got whatever. And this is a relic from a different time. So we take it and we put it in a museum. That's what Grapes of Wrath is to me. So it's a very long-winded explanation to get right where we are right now.
No, but it makes so much sense of, like, when this film does work, like, what is it able to do? What is the film not able to do? The film wants to be a Dust Bowl movie, but the things that are going to still relate to audiences beyond the Dust Bowl, beyond anyone knowing the Dust Bowl, are elements of pride in family, pride in home, economic anxiety, poverty, and those elements don't work as well, partly because you have a big budget studio film about poverty. That rarely works.
And also, too, because it's all directly related to a monster under the bed that people alive today don't have that connection. We just don't. I mean, my grandma was born in 1933. Okay? That's after the Great Depression starts. So it's like this, and she's 80, she's like 85, I don't know. Don't make me do math right now. She's 85 years old. The last generation that can connect to that is going away. And this movie's so about that I just don't see it having the cultural resonance that all its other contemporaries, the big ones I already named, it has and will continue to have.
I want to talk now about Henry Fonda, because he's an actor very similar to the way we're now looking and reassessing John Ford. I now just want to watch all the Henry Fonda films.
Yeah, Henry Fonda's great. I mean, he's unbelievable, and he has huge range.
He does, and he is
particularly for actors at this time.
Absolutely, and he just has this confidence. I mean, he's done so many great comedies as well. I mean, The Lady Eve is around this time where he's absolutely hysterical. Obviously, he's very stoic. He's going to be Wyatt Earp next week for our My Darling Clementine review. But this is somewhere where...
For my Darling Clementine?
Our My
Darling Clementine review.
Yeah. Pronouns.
Yeah.
And this is a movie that, very easily, the movie could feel too dated to watch, because he kind of walks on screen with a very... not entirely Leave It to Beaver, but a very gee whiz, I'm going to exist within a Norman Rockwell-like understanding.
Yeah, and that's the problem with studio pictures at this time going through all the way to the 50s. I mean, the characters are so exaggerated in their movements, and so there's nothing subtle about it. It's usually you're getting hit over that. It's like, I want you to know what I'm feeling, and I'm going to make sure you know that in every movement I make. And that comes from how theatrical, film was back then. I mean,
but he kind of downplays it in a way as well, because even though he's saying...
Well, compared to everyone else in the film, certainly.
True.
Yeah, certainly on that.
Well, it's just kind of find that, he's a very, very tall man who can make himself look really small. Mm-hmm. And that is part of, obviously, the beginning of, 12 Arrogant Men. But here he is. He went to jail for murder, And he's still like able to downplay it in a way that he feels. I mean, he's just a very tall, skinny man. When he puts his hands in his pockets, he seems even smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about him, since he is like the outsider within his own family, because he's been gone for so long. He just can naturally be small and naturally be the new patriarch of the family in an instant.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something just very impressive about that as a performance. And I think he works really well with John Ford to kind of pull that off. The monologue that we're going to undoubtedly have at the end of this podcast, where he says, I'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
That is a moment where John Ford has done such an amazing job with shot composition of the film, and does his kind of classic look at the wider scope of this film. He does a really intense close-up on Henry Fonda's face because he knows he can do it. Like, he gives the frame and the movie over to Henry Fonda for this moment. I found that to be really effective.
Well, we'll talk about that.
You're not a fan?
I'm not a fan of that monologue.
Oh, okay.
But not because of Henry Fonda,
Mm-hmm.
just because the monologue's ridiculous.
Okay.
What he's actually saying is absurd. But we'll talk about that in a second. I think a lot of what we're talking, though, what we attribute, though, to Ford there is just because what he was able to do for his whole career is that he's just got that face, man. I mean, he has that face. You trust that face. That's what made him such an effective villain when he's a villain in films, is because, like, there's something really scary about a nice guy that does evil things. Like, you know what I mean?
And that was like the most jarring thing. That
Once Upon a Time in the West
he'd never been a villain before.
Mm-hmm.
And to watch him be just so
murder a child in the first scene.
Brutal
Yeah.
is something so jarring with the imagery of him.
Mm-hmm.
And not everyone could do that. I mean, I don't think Gary Cooper ever had that range.
No.
For sure. And he was up there. I mean, he's Sergeant York.
John Wayne never did it.
John Wayne, I mean, Searchers is ish.
Yeah. Well, that's a very, very nuanced thing. We'll get to that later. We'll have a long conversation
It's
about
also
that.
funny that John Wayne won the Oscar for, I think, a miscasting.
Mm-hmm.
He was Richard, was it Cogburn?
Cogburn.
In the original True Grit, whereas you see the remake and what the book was intended was, this guy is a has-been of a cowboy. And then John Wayne, a hero of a cowboy, and the lead of the movie, and won an Oscar.
Yeah, he was nominated later for The Shootist, though, too, which
I've never seen.
Yeah, and he shows a lot of range in that. I mean, it's a cowboy dying of cancer is old. John Wayne dies of cancer. It sort of fits the whole thing. But getting back to that monologue, listen, I know that, like, the book ends a lot differently than and we'll talk about that probably, how the book ends.
It's been a bit. I'll try to remember some more.
I kind of remember.
Yeah.
So if I'm wrong on that, I don't know the page number, so forgive me. But so he opens up with this whole monologue, like, I'm going to be there when the guy's down on his luck. I'm going to be there, and he goes on and he drones on about this, which is the reason I don't like it is because it's everything else about the film. It's just so melodramatic, and to the point where not only did you telegraph every moment to this point, you're now going to have a telegraph that telegraphs what was telegraphed. It's ridiculous. Like at the end of a show or an end of a movie, if you're going to tell me what it's all about in a monologue, that's fine, I guess, but not when it's so obvious what this is all about the whole time. It seems to... I can't think of a more appropriate ending just because the whole movie's this way.
It's also impressive that movie that I feel like dragged on for most of the running time then ends. Like, really, like, it puts you in mode like, yeah, let's watch this happen. The end.
Well, it's like, and also, the hope has to come with a caveat, right? Like, okay, well, maybe they're going to be happy now and find work, but he's got to run away because he's a murderer again. So he's got to run away. It's like, we can't just give it to you.
Right.
We got to take something away. So...
Also, once he says the monologue, I want to watch like the film begin there. That's the part of his story I'd rather see.
Yeah, actually,
I'm really not affected enough by the family. I don't care enough.
The coolest thing about this movie is the truck they drive in.
Oh, yeah.
I hate to make it as simple as that, but that's a really cool truck and one of the better film props of all time.
Sure.
Obviously, it's from the book, too. That's cool. I keep looking at the truck going, how are they all fitting in here? How does this thing move? How's it drive? How's it going to make it? Like, I end up worrying more about whether or not the truck will break down than whether Paul's going to die.
Right.
Or whatever. Paul was weird, but Paul was weird.
Yeah.
They're weird. It's kind of funny because we talk about it in Stagecoach, and also I obviously picked the film to do. But we talked about it in Stagecoach a little bit, about how nuanced the characters are, and that just seems to really kind of go out the window here. You have the preacher, which is played by David Carradine.
Who's also in Stagecoach.
Who's also in Stagecoach. And those performances are great. But, both of them, I think they're both really good. And Henry Fonda is great in this as well. But after that, man, it falls off quick. His mother is really good. She won the Oscar for this. But but again, all of it is like continually to double down on how serious and how devastating this event was. But it really lacks any real humanity. The characters never laugh. It's like smile once in a while. I understand what's going on, and that seems ridiculous, but there's comedy in everything, and that's what makes these characters relatable, and it's just not here.
And I mean, I think it'll go back to the book that I'm not a fan of. There's comedy in Of Mice and Men and East of Eden, both of which also have big moments of tragedy.
Right.
But you understand their life, and I think Ford, maybe because it is about a world in transition, I really didn't feel the power of the location as it did in his other films. This is this town. This means so much. This tombstone has a feeling to it. The Stagecoach and its surroundings have an environment. This really wasn't there, except for one moment I thought was just outstanding, which is when they're leaving the farm the last time. You have the guy on the grounds at loss of the land which used to be able to have crops, and Ford films that in a bit of a diagonal, so it's you just see how large the shadow is from where the sun is, and it's a really empty dirt ground, and it feels like a graveyard.
Yeah,
and he's able to capture these small moments.
Yeah, in the house,
don't feel automatic then, even though it's a man on the ground.
Yeah, the house too, how it looks like a haunted house now, and stuff like that is all really good and effective. The what the book did, which Hollywood wasn't ready for at the time, was the pregnant girl in the film, Jode's sister. The baby dies, and she's still producing milk, and there's a man starving who she gives him her breast to feed him. It's my God,
And there's parts of that book, especially since again, it's been now almost 10 years since I've read this book, kind of thing. But the book felt less like a main character show like this is, and it just felt like a world in chaos in a way that you just can't effectively really do in the studio system unless you're being really kind of subtle with your metaphors. Rebecca, which won the Oscar this year, is a really dark, upsetting movie that is still within the studio system. Still may change to the book, but is able to exist like that. I think it's a lot harder when you're going for this level of studio's intended ambition, I guess, of what they wanted out of the film.
And also, if your subject matter is going to be like this, it's going to be this dark and depressing, and that's what the story is going to be. Maybe you should put a little levity into there somewhere.
Just to get through the day.
Really.
Yeah.
The movie really lacked that for me. Every character outside the family, aside from the preacher, is pretty much hateable. They do awful things to them. I don't know. I'm not interested in seeing that. Some people are, but like I said, very emotionally manipulative, I felt like. So, not a huge resounding recommendation from the Let's Take 5
Right.
group.
No, it isn't, and it's something that I want people to see, that we just have more of a conversation about it. I know it has, it's AFI stocks that loves it. Older critics love it.
Yeah, Ebert's a huge fan.
But I just want to know if more younger filmmakers who still love old movies like we do are also as shruggish.
Dude, it wasn't on DVD until, like I said, it was either 2007 or 2008. This movie is not going to stand the test of time.
Yeah.
I don't think that. It is, despite how famous it is. Because it's weird. You have other Steinbeck novels that are made into movies. Okay, East of Eden's still famous, maybe more so because of James Dean than actually Steinbeck's work. But this book is famous, I think, for Steinbeck. No one thinks of the movie.
Well, it's great.
So,
Mice and Men had two.
I think East of Eden, people think of the movie in general. I don't think that's the case with Grapes of Wrath. People go to the book.
What's weird about Mice and Men, obviously, it's a love book as well. It was a 30s Best Picture nominee. But everyone remembers the remake, the 90s remake.
Yeah, that's the one with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich.
Mm-hmm. So that is still like, that's a new film that works still with a 90s audience.
Mm-hmm.
These themes connect and are still incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes of Wrath, because it's about a dust ball. The dust ball and the depression. I'm telling you, that is what it's about. We can all relate to losing a friend. We can all relate to a lot of this stuff. It doesn't matter what the setting is. It doesn't change. That's why people like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. I can't relate to a dragon flying over my head, but I know what it feels like to feel these feelings that the characters are feeling. This is too specific. I'm telling you it is. I spent 15 minutes of our 30-minute podcast talking about it.
That's okay.
And that's okay.
So, we'll be back next week as we talk about another John Ford, Henry Fonda collaboration called My Darling Clementine. Until then, you can check us out at theartmore.com. Let us know what you think about the Grapes of Wrath. We'd love to hear your thoughts and talk more about its timeliness. While you're there, you can check out other podcasts, including The Immortals. This week, we are reviewing another Western called The Oxbow Incident and reviewing the TV show The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Also, while you're there, go check out Ad Absurdum, where two lawyers discuss the real-life legal implications of pop culture. And, where can we find you?
Constant Aversion.
I would recommend The Last of Us.
Yeah, there's only like 7 to recommend.
I kept thinking about The Last of Us while you were talking about, like, is this world even worth saving? This is just a gross everywhere we go.
Well, I think that's the whole point of the end of The Last of Us.
Yes, it is. So. And, big thanks to Adam Lord for all the music he does for the show. And we'll be back next week. Until then, I'm Austin Bigger.
I'm Eric Martindale.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Well, maybe it's like Casey says. The fella ain't got a soul of his own, just a little piece of a big soul. The one big soul that belongs to everybody. Then
what, Doc?
Then it don't matter. I'll be all around in the dark. I'll be everywhere, wherever you can look. Wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there. I'll be in the way guys yell when they're mad. I'll be in the way kids laugh when they're hungry and they know supper's ready. And when the people are eating the stuff they raise and living in the houses they build, I'll be there too.
I don't understand it, Doc.
Me neither, Ma, but just something I've been thinking about.